So my name's Prajnamanas, and I'm going to continue this series that we're doing on the 5 spiritual faculties, or the 5 powers of the mind, as we chose to call them. I think what will we do? I'll revise a little bit what's happened so far. I'll introduce the 4th out of 5 spiritual faculties, and we'll see if there's time to put it into practice a little bit, see how we do. Before that, I actually just want to add a little bit to Kustasara's announcement, say a little thing about these Monday nights, in case you're new or you've only come a couple of times. The first thing to say is that we run Introduction to Buddhism and Meditation courses pretty much back to back in a small shrine room. So if you've not learned mindfulness of breathing and metta bhavana, or you think, what the basics of Buddhism and what's this all about, and how does something like the series that we do in this room fit into it all, just book on one of those. It's really easy, and the minute the previous one finishes, the next one starts. That's a really good sort of grounding in it all. And if you're free on a Monday night, well, you're just in the other room. But also in here, it's a bit of a sort of shop front for the centre, I think, this class, because we're trying to introduce the Dharma jewel, particularly, of the 3 ideals of Buddhism, the teaching, or some hint of the truth that the Buddha discovered, as far as we've tried to understand it so far. So we introduce these topics and go through a series and so on, but we also do things like welcome back new order members, so people who've committed their life to practicing the Buddha's teaching. They come through this class at some point, well, once in their life only, when they're fresh back from their ordination retreats, and tell you something about their experience. So next week, for example, 3 women who've been on ordination retreats in the last couple of months will be doing that. They'll be introducing their new Buddhist names, for example, telling you something about being initiated into a new life, the experience of that they've had, whatever it is. The week after that, we'll be marking the anniversary of the death of our founder. He died, this month 5 years ago, age 93, I think, and he was an extraordinary man. No time to go into that now, but without him we wouldn't be here, really. And so we mark things like his birthday and the date of his death. And our chair, Surya Gupta, so this is now 2 weeks tonight, Monday 30th, is interviewing Naga Bodhi, a very early order member. I don't know if he was one of the first, I don't think so quite, probably ordained in the 70s, something like that, practicing for a very long time, who's written a sort of biography of our founder, Sangharakshita, called The Boy, the Monk, the Man. And so our chair is going to interview Naga Bodhi about that 2 weeks tonight. Then 3 weeks tonight, Kustasara will finish this series on the 5 spiritual faculties. There's just a little bit about what's coming up. I can't remember what's after that, but anyway, that's three juicy weeks for you. Do come. Okay, so we've been looking at these spiritual faculties. Very, very traditional and also basic Buddhist framework for looking at what we need to develop and how to keep all the qualities of our spiritual life in balance. In a sense, these 5 spiritual faculties, they're sort of a whole picture. In another sense that we'll see tonight, there's sort of progression that you can move through, and that's how we've done it. Tonight, Kustasara will be finishing with wisdom, which is, of course, in a sense, the pinnacle of Buddhist practice. We think that one of the natural outpourings of a deeply wise mind is compassion. You pretty much, if you've heard of Buddhism, you've heard of it being interested in compassion. Well, the wisdom of a Buddha, being an inward experience, is expressed outwardly in compassion. So that's the sort of peak of it. And tonight, if you like, we're on our way there with this week that I've called Absorption. Quite often it's translated as meditation, sometimes concentration. I've called it Absorption partly because I find that a much more attractive notion, but also, it's not just me making it up, words I find attractive, if you see what I mean. I think it might be a more appropriate translation of samadhi, which is the traditional term, samadhi, you might have heard of that. Loads of different ways that term's understood, but that's what we're looking at tonight. And in short, the other spiritual faculties having been developed, you cultivate a deepening, expansive mind through meditation so that you can dwell on how things really are and cultivate wisdom, and that's how you arrive at the end of that sequence. But let's just have a little recap. So you might have to help me, Matt. Matt's my page turner while I'm only have one active leg. That's it. Thank you. Great. So this is our scheme. Hopefully people online can see. Here are the 5 spiritual faculties. What order did we do this in? Faith. Faith indeed. Not clockwise or north, south, east, west or anything. But we started over there with faith, your emotional response to things of value. Moved to energy, sometimes called energy in pursuit of the good. And that basically means if you've had an emotional response to what you think is of value, i.e. the ideal, even if you've just seen a Buddha figure and found it beautiful and it's touched you in some way, say, you then want energy in pursuit of the good, i.e. you want to do something about it, move towards the ideal. Then we looked at mindfulness. I should have drawn these in a line really because this shape isn't making any sense, is it? Never mind. It will, I'm sure it will. Mindfulness. Well, I won't say more about that now because that's a whole talk that we had last week from Ratnaprabha. Mindfulness is in the middle here because it's balancing all the other faculties. You might remember me saying that the previous week. Now I'm on concentration. In a sense, these are pairs that balance each other. If wisdom is a bit more intellectually orientated, faith is a bit more emotionally orientated. If energy is more active, well, meditation, concentration, absorption are more inward and contemplative. And mindfulness balances the whole picture. You could also, this is going to be hard to do visually, draw them in a line that goes faith, energy, concentration, wisdom, all of it surrounded by mindfulness and permeated by it because you want mindfulness in play all the time. You can't, it's sometimes said about these faculties, you could overbalance in one direction or the other, at the top or the bottom or the sides, but you couldn't have too much mindfulness. It's not really possible, if you see what I mean. Mindfulness would develop to different levels and different qualities, but you couldn't have too much of it. Okay, so I've written the traditional terms here as well, just in case, because it's good to know where these things come from in the tradition, but also we've got to remember that these English terms we're using and the way we title our talks and so on, they are all translations. Of course, any word you use is a bit conceptualized and is pointing to something that's not a word. You've got to try and remember that as well. But at least these are older and more long-standing. And of course, if I was Swedish and giving this talk in Sweden, I couldn't say concentration. I'd say koncentration or something. I think that's what you do with Swedish. You replace the last bit with who. Anyway, someone could correct me later. Samadhi. So that's the Pali and Sanskrit word, samadhi. Which I'm calling absorption for various reasons. Meditation we do every day, or at least we attempt every day. Samadhi is a certain sort of state of meditation. It means you're really, if you like, managing to get into a flow. You're not pinging around all over the place anymore. You've got some absorption. Your energies are running together, roughly speaking, and you can concentrate. But then I also find concentration can sound to me rather narrow, because you deliberately concentrate on something and keep out other things, don't you? Like a parent might say to a distracted child, be quiet, I'm concentrating. If you say to me, actually you've got 3 or 4 things in your attention at once and you're having to turn down one thing in order to turn up another. Do you see what I mean? Forcing it slightly. Samadhi is like what Kustasara was describing in the first half, where the soap flakes in the water are completely blended together. Okay, so the energies have, I can't think of a better word, they've blended. Yeah? You haven't got one wheel going in this direction, another one going there, suppressing a distraction here, trying not to be aware of something else in your experience while you, I don't know, drive a car or something. Yeah? Eventually, all of your physical, mental and emotional energies are running together in samadhi. Sounds lovely, isn't it? It is lovely. So that's why I've left that term there. I think that'll do for a recap, except to say that if mindfulness is the quality of attending and being basically aware of your environment, heedful, taking care, and knowing what your purpose is in a particular activity, and not getting thrown around too much by your own mind, samadhi or absorption, I should have crossed this out and written absorption, never mind. Samadhi or absorption is an intensification of mindfulness. Okay? So you can be mindful in a general way as you walk down the road. I mean, you can also be quite unmindful as you walk down the road, can't you? But try tomorrow, 5 minutes of your usual route, just taking in your environment. I sometimes do it walking out here along to the tube, back through the park and up into another door of the building. As a little exercise of letting the mind empty a bit, not running, not chewing over my favourite narratives, and just allowing my experience in. That's a kind of mindful experience. You notice what state the cherry tree's in, you know, I don't know, the fireman getting one of their trucks ready. Anyway, I won't go too much into my own walk. But you just allow yourself to take things in. You don't prejudice your attention too much. Yeah? It's got breadth, it's got some relaxation, but it's got attentiveness. Samadhi is where you choose a particular object of the attention and intensify your mindfulness and allow other objects of attention to subside out of your awareness. Yeah? Not by forcing them out, that's key. So when you meditate on the breath, for example, we always tell you here, don't we, you know, pay attention to your body, experience of sitting on the chair, temperature in the room, sound. You don't block it out, you allow it in, but then you just tune your awareness more to the breathing in and breathing out, yeah? And you let everything else quieten around that. And in a relaxed meditation, at least in the early stages of meditation, if someone then came and tapped you on the shoulder, you wouldn't get a fright. You just open your eyes and look at them, if you see what I mean, because while you're withdrawing a bit from your sense world and having your attention sort of sucked towards all of the sounds and the sensations and what they remind you of, crucially, which is the deadly thing, isn't it? Is being reminded of something and pinging off into 100 sort of curlicue thoughts. While you've withdrawn a bit from that sense world, the sense world wouldn't shock you. You see what I mean? You can still handle it. So that's an initial stage of absorption. Okay. So what else would you say absorption means that I haven't covered yet? What happens when you get more into your meditation? So we're assuming the mind's not super distracted now. It's starting to coalesce around the particular project you've given it. What sort of thing happens?
Become more focused.
You become more focused, yeah.
It's more pleasurable.
More pleasurable, yeah. What sort of thing would you be thinking of, do you know?
Just sort of like more sort of rapturous or blissful qualities in the body.
Yeah.
A bit more spacious perhaps, and lighter, more at ease in the body.
Yeah, okay. So that's good because you've mentioned pleasure's always got a mental aspect to it, hasn't it? But you mentioned the body particularly and ease. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great.
Relaxation.
Relaxation, yeah.
Start to notice slightly different things in your normal.
Start to notice different things in your...
Yeah, you start to notice different, just alternative things to what you normally would.
You start to notice different things. Could you say what sort of thing?
Yeah, I can't think of it.
Okay. Well, I think I know what you mean. You become attuned to different things, different qualities, maybe.
Yes, yeah, perhaps like a way of feeling.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, you tune in more to your feeling. Yeah, I think that's definitely true. Yeah, yeah.
You might also get different perspectives on things that maybe bother you, say, a different part of the day, and then through being absorbed in meditation, you get a different perspective on life.
Different perspective, yeah. Yeah, that's probably across meditations, isn't it? Or a meditation life, that your perspective, what happens to your perspective, would you say? Or maybe it's in one meditation, maybe that's what you mean.
Yeah, I find if I'm sort of, I don't know, say I'm worried about something that's going on, or like overthinking a situation, when I meditate it can make me feel like it sort of changes the relevance of things.
Ah, okay, yeah, I know what you mean now. Yeah, thanks, Peter. Yeah, the relevance of different things shifts around. Something might come out of the foreground and fade into the background a bit, and vice versa. I think, yeah, great.
Calm.
Calm, who said that? Was that
Yeah,
Matt?
me.
Yeah, calm.
Calm and content. Sense
Okay,
of things
yeah.
being okay.
Sense of things being okay, yeah, I like that. That reminds me of the previous one in a way. I suppose what I'm thinking of with Peter's remark is that particular worries, say, fade into a general background. I often have this effect, and being more thinking orientated than feeling orientated myself. In fact, you've all reminded me of this sort of thing. Let's see if I can sort of draw it together. Your own relationship to your thoughts relaxes, let's say. They become less sort of tense and up close and compelling, can fade into the background a bit, and you can tune into a little bit more your feeling that's been running along all the while, and there's not always time to process it. I even think, maybe this is my particular bent, but in daily life there's not always time actually to feel everything that's happening. There's too much experience, really. That's part of the reason you need a meditation practice. It's a bit like digesting food. You haven't necessarily felt everything that's happened. You see what I mean? So that's another kind of fundamental after getting into your physical experience. What's your feelingful life like? Yeah, and the perspective question I think helps with that. Those were all good examples and much more than I had written down, so thank you. I'm just going to add one more thing though, which is, like I say, as you start to concentrate more, let's take the breath since that's what we were doing this evening, your energies start to become more unified. So I hinted at this at the beginning. Instead of having, say, intense mental energy and a sluggish body, anyone ever had that? Felt a bit wired up and tired at the same time? Yeah, it's quite a common state in our world, I think. Okay, those two things will start to come back towards each other and both be mutually modified. You see what I mean? So that you get into something more like another translation of samadhi that we've sometimes used is energized calm. And it's deliberately a bit paradoxical. Because of course, while calm is important, if you just sell Buddhism on the basis of calm, or you just meditate in order to be calm, in the end you'll encounter frustration because you've got more energies than that. In fact, you've got wilder energies than that, of course. And you need to be channeling those energies, but be able to be in a calm state. That's the sort of thing I mean, where if somebody had to interrupt your meditation, you can then engage because you're relaxed, but you're not getting really sluggish or sleepy or aversive to the world or really withdrawn. It's not good to interrupt people in meditating, don't get me wrong, but energized calm is this slightly paradoxical state where we're starting to create some meaningful middle ground between the two states we can otherwise spend our time in, which is basically either wired up or asleep. Is that familiar? With screen time, morning till night, we've basically tuned to swipeable, textable things all day if you're not careful, and all week if you're really not careful, except when you're unconscious. You see what I mean? And samadhi is saying not only do you have a daily practice where you create islands, mindfulness, let's say, is creating islands between those two. You're saying, I'm not going to do either of those. I'm going to be awake and present, even if I feel really sluggish, or even if my mind's really racy. I'm going to practice some awareness of that and experience it instead of be swept along by it. Samadhi is saying, you can deepen way beyond that too. Tune up your energies, tune up your calm, and basically integrate. So we sometimes use that language too. In fact, that was the word in my mind when Kustasara was talking about the soap flakes and the water, is what happens to those two things when they're fully mixed that's, I think, a symbol for the integration of the mind's energies, and that includes physical ones. Yeah. So eventually you've got what I would call a balanced will. Okay, and that's where you're attending to an object of meditation. Say it could be metta as well, not just mindfulness. You intend to keep your mind on your friend and open your heart to them. You can will that a bit and encourage it to happen, but you're also open to things arising within that surprise you a bit, or even a sense that you're tuning into a current of that existing already in the world, or your experience, whichever, because the boundary between those is starting to soften as well. And eventually, in a really good meditation, you're not sure if you're doing it anymore, or I don't know who else to name. You're not sure if it's sort of happening to you, or you're doing it, or you're not sure if it's coming into you from the world, or you're creating it outwards into the world. Does that make sense? There are meditation practices that you could take up if you choose to be ordained that make that really explicit, where you cultivate a relationship to a figure. At first you've got to conjure it more in your imagination, a Buddha or a Bodhisattva. Eventually you can have experiences more as if you're being approached by the figure and the figure is coming towards you and trying to give you blessings and metta, if only you can be open to it. So the task starts to kind of mix up a bit more and become, in a really delightful way, less clearly defined in terms of your will. But for shorthand, I'm calling that balanced will. Do you see what I mean? We had the image last week of, this is ancient Indian literature, don't forget, so it's not going to be relevant to many of us. And it's from before pasturing, okay? The cow herding image, where the boy, the cowherd, who's got his willow twig whip for the cows, and he hasn't got a penned field to keep them in, if you see what I mean. He's got to keep them together. And who at first has to goad them more in different directions and go and chase ones that have scattered off. You can tell this is about the mind, can't you? One cow scattered off that way, another 3 have lain down over there, 5 of them want to go and do something in that other corner, and you have to run around goading them back into one group. Eventually, that cowherd can just occasionally apply the goad or a touch with a stick. After that, can sit down in the shade of a tree and watch the cows. You see what I mean? And the Buddha used lots of metaphors like this for the mind and how it can progress. That particular sequence stops there, but I imagine that the mind can go much, much further still, and I don't know what happens to the cows. Maybe time stops, I don't know, and you stay under the shade of the tree for 7 days straight or something. But what I'm really getting at with this matter of energized calm is that you start going beyond the ordinary polarities of your mind. Yeah. So, again, to go back to the announcement in the tea break, the life of activity and the life of calm start to integrate with each other and interfuse. I believe, if I remember that text well enough, I also don't know what century it's from, but read it sometimes, that it says in the end, you can't choose one over the other. And that's a sort of reflex of our meditation practice. You can't say, I want to do all this with the will, or I don't want to make effort anymore because now I'm a meditator, so I'm going to sort of tune out of things. So in the end, you can't do either of those and have a deeply satisfying engagement. Okay. So there is something about what samadhi is. Oh dear, I've got much more than I can say here. Okay. One more thing about samadhi. Let's go to 2. No, 3. Thanks. Here's another formulation of what we're doing in Buddhist practice. Okay, you might have heard of the threefold way: ethics, meditation, wisdom. They're placed in this sequence because meditation can't deepen very much without an ethical practice eventually. Okay. Sorry to introduce another list. Anyway, this is a really simplified version of the path that the Buddha was emphasizing again and again at the end of his life. So on his final teaching tour, when he knew he was dying, he was going to lots of different communities, saying again and again, follow the path of ethics, meditation, and wisdom. Okay. Now, this tells us something about our meditation practice. we want those superconscious states, all of which use these images of water blending together, permeating things, inspiring us, where even the unconscious energies are now integrated. That's another meaning of samadhi, that you don't just deliberately attend to something. Your unconscious energies become involved too, the things that you're not even in touch with most of the time. Okay. However, if you've got something on your conscience, it will always block this. And that takes some tuning into. So, if I've spoken a bit roughly to somebody, it is harder to meditate. No joke. And I know it, but I have to dig that out of my mind and become aware of it. And it's usually something I don't quite want to become aware of. Yeah? That's part of why we meditate, to sort of purify the mind, as the tradition puts it. Okay. This is, if you like, the footwork. This is the traditional way around the footwork. In a sense, you've got to clear up. You've got to have a clear conscience for meditation to go very deep. I probably made my point now. And it goes the other way. So here's the traditional formulation. You become more and more skillful in your life. Try to give more, speak more and more truthfully, in all its aspects, if you see what I mean. It's not just a literal matter, truthfulness. It means including everything, not exaggerating or underplaying, telling someone all of something that's relevant, etc. Try to avoid intoxicating the mind, whether that's through substances or our own sort of addictive fantasies and thoughts. Then you can deepen the mind. Then you can contemplate reality. And, let's say on a really good retreat, you'll move a bit through this sequence. Okay, you'll clear up your mind a bit. And even when we leave for retreats, we try and think, okay, have I got anything I need to just go and see somebody about, say sorry about, or write somebody a card, or I don't know, phone my mother. You see what I mean? You try and leave a clean slate before you go on retreat so that you can really meditate. And then on retreat, you can pick up a contemplation subject like impermanence. Notice that applies to everything in the phenomenal world, just as it does everything in your own body and mind. And start to see just a little bit more the nature of things. Yeah, wisdom. So, there's the traditional way around it. Like I say, this is footwork. It used to be that you weren't taught meditation until you'd been part of a spiritual community doing work that was needed for some time. I don't know if you know the Zen thing about go back to pounding rice. Is that familiar? I've never stayed in one or two people, I've never stayed in a Zen monastery myself, but the famous phrase is, go back to pounding rice. And that's the punchline in all the stories, where the disciple goes to the master and tries to say something really complicated about reality and hopes that the master will agree with his new fancy thought. And the master says, go back to pounding rice. Meaning, don't start abstracting and trying to be clever about what's essentially a devotional, religious practice and orientation towards the good and the beautiful. Go and do something useful, please. Go back to pounding rice. And that would actually be a way of working on this, because if all you're doing, say, I imagine what's meant here is you've got to pound rice, I guess, to get the husks off, and they'd eat that 2 or 3 times a day in the monastery. I don't know. If that's all you do all day, well, you're going to get bored and annoyed, aren't you? And your own ego is going to manifest more grossly. You're going to have to get more realistic about the work that you have to do on the day-to-day level before you can go deeper in meditation. Yeah? So it's a little lesson. It's easy to trot these things off, by the way, when you're giving a talk. I'm sure I'd need to pound a lot more rice myself. About these first 2 stages, to purify your mind so you can meditate, cultivate wisdom. But I'm just going to share with you now something, because I thought it was so good. Borrowed from a talk of Maitreya Bandhu's, another teacher here, who said this a couple of weeks ago on our urban retreat. There's this traditional sequence, and it sounds good, doesn't it? And it's logical. Purify the mind, deepen it, penetrate into the way things are. So yes, we take that on. He pointed out, actually in most people's experience, and at least to begin with, it happens the other way around. So I'm going to, let's see if I can draw more arrows. So he said, really what usually happens is you glimpse something more of how things are, even if that's a desperate thought of, there must be more to life than what I've experienced so far, than getting up again and again every day and getting on the same bus and doing something I don't care that much about. Or you've had an experience of a painting or of nature or of a communication with a person that's touched you more deeply, or you've basically broken through to something. Has anyone ever had one of these moments? Not dependent on meditation practice particularly, but you just have a little breakthrough in your life, something opens up. Yeah? You see more of what might be out there. You go a little bit beyond your literal world of the senses. I mean, I'm hoping some of you have, because in my understanding at least, this is why most people come to Buddhist centres, because they've had some sort of moment like that. Like I say, even if it's just frustration with what you've understood to be the norms, and you rebel against that a little bit and say, I think there could be more to this. Yeah? So you have a tiny touch of wisdom you borrow from this stage. We sometimes call it vision. You have a vision experience. Yeah? You think this has got something to do with the mind, and I've heard that meditation is a way of working on the mind, so let me go to one of those Buddhist centres and at least roughly do what they suggest I do. And then, when you start to meditate a bit more regularly, you see that it can be, you know, me too, but a bit of a mess in there, and you've got some things to clear up, i.e. your day-to-day ethical life, yeah, your relationships, how you conduct your relationships, yeah? How you regard other people, and the thoughts that you have about them, not just whether you push them over in the street when you see them, but how you speak to them, even how you regard them mentally. Let's say especially how you speak to others about them, yeah? How you speak to a second person about that third person who can't hear you conveniently. Yeah? So, well, I just thought that was brilliant, so I wanted to tell more people. Because this direction is conventional, traditional, completely sense-making, and I'm sure completely right. But we're not going to pound rice for 2 years before meditating, are we? We're going to come to a Buddhist centre and learn to meditate, probably because we've had some taste that there's just more out there. I was remembering earlier, I did a term of fencing at school, and just one term, and so we were taught how to, you know, you wear the padded things and a big mask, and it's all quite fun, and you get a sword with a rubber thing on the end, and you've got to prod the other person with it skillfully, and we were all very excited, and we were putting our swords back in the big bag at the end of the session, and the teacher said, in 18th century France, if you were learning this, you'd have had to practice that footwork we did at the beginning of the session, how to advance and retreat basically, for 2 years before you were allowed to pick up a sword. It was just doing that thing that people do for teenagers, basically saying you don't know how lucky you are. I don't know how much you care when you're a teenager, but I remembered it. It said you'd have to do 2 years of footwork before anybody handed you a rapier and started teaching you how to wield the sword. So traditionally, it was like that. You'd work on your ethics for a long time and do things that needed doing, purify the mind, before you picked up the sword of meditation. We just live in a different world, really. It's got to be somehow the other way around. You've got to, as it were, hand people the sword pretty much straight away, and I suppose leave the management of both directions of this, in a sense, to the individual. Did you have a question? I'm just going to pause for a minute.
Yes, I think you sort of answered it.
Okay.
I sort of was going to ask today, have you had one of those experiences where you started from wisdom and then led to meditation?
Yes, I think I have. Let me think. Yes, when I'll just tell a story for a minute and then let me see where I'll go with this. Yeah, okay. The year that I first came to this centre, I had a sort of bit of a crisis in my life, and I mean, it's too long a story to tell. I didn't know what was what. I think my body and my health and my emotions, even my thoughts, were kind of a bit all over the place, and I was a bit sort of lost. And funnily enough, I was listening to some gospel music, just a cappella singing. It's interesting that it's Christian stuff, but I didn't don't know, it didn't make me think anything about God, actually. But it's extremely beautiful and uplifting, and I was stood at the bottom of the garden, and I was very lost. I was on a holiday with some friends, and I remember not actually being able to tell them the sort of state I was in, partly because I was in such a panic about it. This is, 6 months before I came here and started learning to meditate. And felt so uplifted by this music, stood in this garden, very suddenly. I think these things happen without warning. That's part of what happens. Your psyche sort of trips up into a completely different experience. And I just remember the sky above me, and sort of something to do with beauty, but immense kind of energy. And I remember thinking later, that would definitely be enough to make you believe in God. I suppose what I mean is I felt touched by something beyond me. Definitely, almost physically. And I remember thinking later, that would definitely be enough to make you believe in God if you tripped up and went in that direction, let's say. I didn't pursue it in that way, but it affected me a lot. I'd even say almost kind of changed me. But yeah, the crucial thing I'd say about it now is that I felt moved and touched by something that I wasn't creating, if you see what I mean. So perhaps it started to show me that I don't have to actually put my life together in all these complicated ways we're always trying to do. And maybe even I can't. It's about, and that could make you worried, couldn't it? It depends whether you've got something to fall back on, like a meditation life. But it might have been a moment of starting to give up, trying to get life right on the terms I'd been dealt so far. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So it breaks something apart. I mean, in a sense, they're risky because they break apart a bit of a paradigm. That's why you need a spiritual community sooner or later, and luckily I found one just some months later. So yes, they break apart a bit of a paradigm, and you need a new one, but probably a more open one. Yeah. Okay. So I want to say a little bit about the further reaches of what can be achieved in samadhi and absorption and concentration now. So where are we? We're not going to use 2. Do you mind putting 1 back on for me? Matt's very kindly. Turning pages, there it is. Yeah. Oh, that's a big old mantra. Okay. There. Yeah, that's here.
Oh, it's there.
There you go. Okay. So, I'm starting to set us up in a way for the next talk now, because the further reaches of samadhi basically prepare us for wisdom. Okay? What this basically does, once, if you like, we've dealt with the ethical matters as far as we can, and the footwork, is you start to enrich and nourish the mind. You've cultivated a mind now that basically wants to move towards the ideal, so there's no real problem doing things like concentrating. Okay, you've eliminated strong craving, ill will, sense desire, sluggishness. Do you see what I mean? You've managed to pacify all of that. You're nourishing and warming up the mind. And the mind's becoming more and more subtle, okay? And less in need of being self-conscious. So it can now move more spontaneously and more naturally towards objects of value without having to think about itself. You see what I mean? You don't have to be saying to yourself, if you're in a deeper meditation, I am meditating. In a lovely way, you kind of forget that you are, but you're completely absorbed in the task as well. You see what I mean? You don't have self-consciousness anymore. So instead of thinking, here's me, Prajnamanas, trying to cultivate mindfulness, and isn't it a bit frustrating when I keep falling down? That subject of me and the object of meditation start to refine and become more subtle and more like 2 poles of a sphere and less like 2 separate objects. Okay? So the very I've forgotten the word. The very structuring of subject and object, which is normally telling you, almost all the time, I'm a solid thing, existing thing in here, and there is a solid phenomenal world out there that I'm not part of, that starts to relax. Okay? You get initial signs of this when your sense of yourself in the room relaxes and you can't quite tell the difference anymore between your mind and the room that you're in. If you see what I mean, it's more like meditation happening rather than I am meditating and I'm sitting over there and there's so-and-so over there and I don't like him very much and maybe I'll try and talk to that person afterwards. You see what I mean? There's just more like meditation happening and you're participating in it. That's the kind of early stage of what I'm talking about. Subject and object are becoming more refined, starting to dissolve more, and it's not that they become one, it's that their relating just becomes much more subtle and they're incorporated more into a sort of general picture. So what might that mean for us? Well, when I come out of the meditation and communicate with somebody, I'll understand that there's a very subtle, very alive interplay between me and another person, and their behaviour and communication is not a given just as mine isn't. So back at ground level, if I speak really kindly and attentively to somebody, I will bring out much better sides of them than if I didn't, and have different thoughts about them. You see what I mean? One mark for me of experienced practitioners is they can meet almost anybody and just see the good in them and really enjoy that. Doesn't mean they become blind to a person's faults or don't, or that they start condoning really unskillful behaviour. Of course, you don't lose that awareness. The ultimate example of this is, of course, the Buddha, who never lost that awareness for a moment. However, you see more and more of the potential in somebody and start to feel, in a positive way, more and more responsible for your effect in the world, because you see, you understand yourself as an agent in it. Okay? So that's one of the implications of understanding that subject and object are not solid things separate over here and over there. You see what I mean? So one other thing that would start to mitigate, for example, is blame. Because instead of thinking, that person has such and such qualities, I don't like them, they've made me feel this way, yeah? You understand that there's skillful and unskillful behaviour probably in both your minds. Those have interacted in a certain way, and it probably didn't have to be that way. Perhaps you can even extend more and more empathetic understanding to why things have turned out the way they have between you and another person. But you also start to realise more and more of the freedom that is actually inherently yours. It's just it hasn't been in play. We haven't realised it and reclaimed it yet. Yeah? So while you identify less and less solidly with yourself, and are less and less likely to say, well, I'm afraid I'm just like that, so that's the way this is going to be. He's going to have to get used to it. That's what I'm like. That's how I do things, so tough luck. Yeah? You solidify yourself less and less in that way, realise more and more of your own potential. Exactly the same thing is happening in your awareness of other people, and it's less and less individualised in an unhelpful way. Yeah? In other words, you separate people out less and less. I don't mean they become one sort of shmush. Let me put this another way. There's a mandala of 5 Buddhas, which are different aspects of enlightenment. 2 of them have wisdoms called, I'm going to forget, sameness and distinctiveness, yeah, or sameness and discernment. So in other words, one of them has the wisdom that ultimately all beings share the same nature. Yeah? All beings suffer, all beings don't want to, all beings have the potential not to. Another Buddha, in the same mandala, it's a shape a bit like this actually, has the wisdom to know that no 2 experiences are the same. And there's actually nothing, there's no 2 things you could ever call identical. Therefore, there's nothing so solid that you could call it an identity, because that means something that has ident. It's identical to something else. In other words, it remains fixed and can be identified finally and written down as such. Yeah? So different aspects of the Buddha mind can hold those contradictions because their awareness of what we have to call, in our clumsy way, subject and object, which basically means self and other, has become so subtle that we can hardly conceive of it. And we've got to give them names like wisdom of sameness, wisdom of difference. Yeah. Actually, all part of one enlightenment experience. But those 5 Buddhas are sort of separated out as emanations of the Buddha mind to show us that it's got all sorts of different powers of perception and qualities in terms of what it actually sees when it sees another being. The ultimate wisdom, which you start to hear in developed Buddhism, is that living beings need saving, of course, from their suffering, but there are no living beings to save. It doesn't mean that people don't exist exactly. It just means that there's no such entity as a living being with a thick line around them, separate from this other living being over here. You can't say that finally. You also don't say finally, it's all one. Incidentally, that's what Hinduism says. So if anyone ever tries to tell you all religions are saying the same thing, you can send them our way. They're not, in fact, very, very different visions of reality, and Buddhism is not a vision of oneness. So here we are in the higher reaches of samadhi, edging towards wisdom, as these things start to become rehearsed and more familiar, and more like they're infusing daily life in those ways I've described. When you see another person, you see someone who could actually become enlightened. That's very lofty. Let's say at least you see their best qualities, how those could grow, and how you, in a sense, mustn't cramp that, and your duty is to foster and expand it as much as you can. Okay, so when we've identified less and less solidly with ourselves, paradoxically the mind has more and more strength because it's looking to the world, the sense world, less and less for that strength and fulfillment. So instead of being just at prey to what we want to see with our eyes, taste with our tongue, hear with our ears and so on, we want to see in ourselves more and more faith, energy, concentration, wisdom, etc. Those become more and more our faculties, which is why these are called spiritual faculties. Just like you've got a faculty of hearing, a faculty of tasting, this is saying transform those into a faculty for energy and pursuit of the good, for samadhi, etc. The more we're cultivating that, the more you'll come out of your meditation, not identify so solidly yourself or anybody else, which doesn't mean that you don't see qualities and aren't really realistic about getting to know yourself and getting to know another person and going through your nature, your bodily, emotional, mental nature. You can't get around that, you've got to go through it. The more you'll be free of your own likes and dislikes and more able to concentrate on the spiritual task, which is cultivating wisdom. So the less literally you take the world. There's just one kind of caveat I've got to give here. When I say you take the world less literally, I mean you're less sort of lethally dependent on whether or not you can eat the food you want to eat or have a drink when you're really tired and want to unwind, because the mind is developing more and more power. That outside world starts to become more and more a play of appearances, okay, that you can play with. I mean that in a very particular way. I mean it in a very ethical way. Instead of you being completely dependent on solid objects, food and drink, what people say to you and don't say to you, whether they've loved you in the way that you wanted to or not, all of us are sensitive to that, I know. You take it more and more into yourself, and the outer world is more and more something where appearances arise because they're not literal entities, and you can interact with them in the most playful, skillful way, knowing, for example, as someone develops more and more samadhi and moves more and more towards the pranayama, that even death, even your own death, or even the bereavement, say, could leave you full of love and appreciation, but not despairing or getting dejected, because you know that actually something that was a process of change simply continued to change. That does not mean you don't develop friendship and love for other beings. Of course, that's what we do. That's going to be most of what we're doing. But you see things as less and less solid. So more and more appearances, but you don't discount it. Okay? You can see more and more that there's something inexpressible, not made of bricks and mortar, or flesh and bone, suffusing everything, which is the nature of things. And the nature of things, it could never be made of flesh and bone or bits of wood banged together, could it? It's simply the nature of things. You don't discount that either. So I'm getting this from Sangharakshita. He says that as you cultivate more and more wisdom, you don't discount the appearances and you never lose sight of the void. Okay? The void is a sort of Buddhist name for that ineffable thing. It's not a nothingness. It's simply, well, it's not simply anything probably. It's the closest you can get, at least in concepts, to the nature of things. Yeah? It's not made of anything except your awareness. That's one thing you can play with in meditation. You can't experience anything that's not made of your own awareness. Okay, that's the kind of reason they've used the language of void. It doesn't. This singing bowl doesn't contain its own nature. It's actually, even the cool metal on my fingers, let alone the sight of it across the room, is made of your awareness of it. Okay, that's sometimes referred to as the void. So he's saying eventually, you never discount the appearances, because mainly that's going to be other people. Yeah. That's the most important appearance, isn't it? Other people. You never discount the appearances, but you don't lose sight of the void. Okay, I think I'll leave it there for this evening. So thanks for listening. Yeah, and do come back next few weeks to join us for those couple of special evenings, and then another talk on wisdom. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.